welcome back to the African Regional Conference 2015. I'm joined now by Alain Raes, SWIFT's Chief Executive for Europe, the Middle East, Africa and the Asia Pacific. Alain, welcome and thank you for your time.
Good afternoon. Thank you.
Now, Alain, you were speaking today in one of the earlier plenary sessions, and obviously SWIFT has access to some amazing data on sort of the economic growth in Africa. What are the key numbers behind Africa's growth story at the moment, and what have you found from your numbers?
Indeed, we've been in Africa for many years. Actually, this is the 22nd regional conference that we do organize in Africa. And since more than 30 years now, we've been able to witness how the continent is really growing economically. And as a matter of fact, we know for years now that there is always a correlation between the numbers we have in terms of the number of payments that are being exchanged between different countries or within countries, and the sort of GDP growth that we can observe in the same countries. And actually, the correlation factor is about 2.5 times. In other words, when we see the volumes on that, you can actually divide this number by 2.5 times, and you ended up by roughly the GDP growth that you can see in those countries. What we've seen for the last couple of years in Africa is that it's always about a 13 to 14% growth of volumes over the network, which means that basically you ended up divided by 2.5, you ended up by an average growth of the GDP of 5 to 5.5% every year. What is even more interesting is that if you look actually backwards the last 16 years or so, this growth in Asia has been, I'm looking now at the numbers of SWIFT again, has been for about 15 to 16% compounded rate, which is quite impressive, right? You look at the baseline that was very low at the time, now we're reaching about nearly 3% of all the volumes that we see on our network that are coming from Africa. That is really actually a tremendous growth that we are witnessing. This growth tends to stay. Now the key question will be, how will it stay again further for another few years? Will it stay really international? Will it grow also domestically and regionally within the different parts of Africa? That the question is still out for debate. We'll see what's going to happen, but I remain very much confident that looking at the new environment you see in Africa, the new global economic environment, the political environment as well, that is evolving a lot, that this growth will stay.
Now, obviously, this growth is being supported by the rollout of very successful regional payment systems, but of course, they in turn have to be supported by the physical infrastructure to support continental trade. Mm-hmm. Are things moving in the right direction there? Is this duality being success? Is there success here, or how are we moving
I think
forward?
what you are really highlighting here in your question is the sort of desperate need in Africa for infrastructures. And I'm really highlighting the word infrastructure. I'm not only talking about financial market infrastructures, I'm also talking about anything else, which is about roads, railways, it's about airports, harbors, and all that is really needed to leverage a sort of very solid foundation that the transformation of Africa over the last few years has now allowed, right? That is really coming, but you see that other countries perhaps have moved faster. I'm really referring now to my experience also in Asia, where you see that countries like China, priorities have been a lot about building the infrastructure that will then allow a much faster and rapid global economical growth. That is exactly what happened in Asia, and I would hope that now the continent here in Africa will be allowing the same stuff, right? Part of that, obviously, is what we call the financial market infrastructure, is making sure that somewhere the financial supply chain ultimately will be matching the physical supply chain. In other words, when you're buying something, you're selling something, at some point of time, the goods have to move from one place to another, and the payments have to follow. The reality today, then, when it comes to Africa, is that the goods are still very slow moving, and the system somewhere, the payment system somewhere, are a bit in advance, right? They're actually quite modern. Many countries have moved to implementing RTGS, high-value payment systems. They've moved also to developing securities settlement systems and all that. All of that is there, but yet you need to making sure that the two actually are moving pretty much, in parallel, which is not the case yet.
And so, looking ahead, if we can achieve this, this can be programmed both physical infrastructure and financial infrastructure together, that has huge implications for sort of intra-African trade corridors and also regional integration, doesn't it?
Exactly, and that is some way also connecting to what I've just said when it comes to Asia. If you look at Asia nowadays, trade, international trade within Asia is actually 60% regional. In other words, 60% of the international trade that you see out of Asia is actually regional trade. It's happening between Asian countries to other Asian countries. In Africa, it's only 10%. And I would suspect that there is actually a connection to the fact that nowadays, you don't have this sort of physical infrastructure to authorize those trades really to happen very seamlessly, smoothly. Asia has done this. So that still has to happen, but I'm pretty sure that when it will get there, then definitely the continent, the banks, the people will be in a position to really leverage the power of the two. Now, this being said, there is still another obstacle to this as well, which is somewhat also similar to what is happening into other major countries in Asia, like India, for instance, which is the very high proportion of unbanked people. Mm-hmm. You have still in Africa hundreds of millions of people that basically do not have a bank account. And those people have had the chance, obviously, in Africa to leverage the power of telecommunication. We like to say in Africa that sometimes you don't have access to water, but you have access to mobile. Everybody has a mobile in Africa. And many people have been able to start moving money in between individuals by using the mobile. Now, the problem that you have still is that all these systems remain very much domestic, if not even local at the level of a city or a region of a country. Now, the key question will be how all the systems will be interconnected. How is Africa, with all the banks, central banks, the market infrastructure, will get together to create some sort of harmonized way to exchange the money and therefore also boost the future development of trade in between countries and within countries.
Okay, I see. And so obviously, as you mentioned, this has huge implications in terms of financial inclusion, and obviously
Absolutely.
Bringing in sort of the poor and giving them access to financial services.
And that is not easy. I mean, I was attending another conference a few months ago in India, actually. The World Economic Forum was organizing a conference there. And they were talking exactly about the same challenge, right? And Prime Minister Modi in India is taking really the sort of big challenge at heart, saying how can he move hundreds of millions of unbanked people to being banked, right? To have a relationship, to have a place where basically they can leverage the power of their savings in a way by buying stuff, selling stuff, and all that. Africa is actually the same thing. It's not that easy because you can imagine that in a world where there is more and more regulations, more and more obstacles like anti-monetary laundering and all that. That is for the largest banks a big issue in how to get to the people that ultimately, are not close to you, that for many of them cannot even write or read. So how can you make sure that these obstacles about people can be overcome and therefore get access to banks and to the possibility really to exchange money much more fluently than it is today?
It's going to take a lot of hard work and many more years, but obviously we're heading in the right direction, which is very encouraging.
Which is, I think, and I like to say all the time that, hopefully here, technology helps. Mm. That is perhaps one of the beauty of perhaps the nicest beauty of the technology is that it really helps people to transforming stuff that were completely impossible before. And clearly when it comes to Africa, where people are living in a very rural environment, getting access through mobiles, being able to have a bank account, making transfers, buying stuff and all that, I'm pretty sure will help boosting the global economy of the continent.
Alain, thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.